Welcome to another episode of Conscious Business Connections, brought to you by the New York City chapter of Conscious Capitalism. My name is Bob Caporale, and I'm joined today by Marc Miller. Marc is in the commercial real estate business, but also transitioning into the world of art. Marc is calling from Chappaqua, New York, and has an interesting story to share. I'm sure we're going to have a great discussion. So, Marc, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bob. Good to meet you.
Oh,
Pleasure.
you bet. You bet. It's great to have you on the show. And I know we have a lot to talk about because it's, two completely different worlds, it seems like, right? Commercial real estate, art, like how do those things go together? Well, I'm sure you're going to tell us. So
Right.
first of all, give us a little background. I know you've had a long
Sure.
stretch in the commercial real estate business, and
Mhm.
in New York City, that's
Yeah,
got some unique challenges right now. So tell us a little bit about your history there.
absolutely. Well, I grew up in Queens and went to Queens College, so my life was very kind of in the New York area. Started out in accounting, and in my second accounting job within that first year, I found myself auditing a commercial realtor, and I started watching these brokers argue in the hallways and yell at each other. And I was living at home, and I said to my folks, uh, I'm not thriving with accounting. I'm not loving it. And I really think that office leasing and what these people are doing could be my occupation.
Cool.
So they said, listen, we have your back. You're here and you're young. Make the change. So within that 1 year, I transferred to become a commissioned salesman, a young broker at a firm, a small shop with 10 to 15 people, and that was how I began.
That's awesome. That's really
Thank
cool.
you.
And so, obviously on this show, we talk about conscious businesses and conscious business practices. And the whole idea is that capitalism could be a good thing as long as businesses practice it in a conscious way, whether that's around purpose or leadership or cultural stakeholders, all kinds of different ways. So, commercial real estate, not going to lie, it's not necessarily, I think, the first thing that people would think about when they think about conscious businesses, not
Right.
trying to put anybody in a box, but
Yeah.
tell me your thoughts on this. I mean, I know that you have
Yeah.
a pretty strong feelings about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It has a dastardly reputation somewhere between ambulance chasing attorneys and maybe used car salesmen without scruples.
Right.
And I'm sure we know, by the way, lawyers and car salesmen who are terrific, by the way, right?
Absolutely. There's no
They
stereotyping here, but
exactly.
yes, I mean, this is what I
So
mean. Like, people don't always think about conscious business doesn't always equal commercial real estate, right? In most people's
right.
minds, I think.
So just for my background, growing up with values and seeing how my dad conducted his life, uh, I just went into this dog eat dog business, seeing the aggressiveness of my colleagues and of the industry, but just kind of like intuitively knowing that I had to do right and not a lie
Mhm.
and not be sleazy.
Right.
And it's not like I started out at age 20. By the way, my first year in the industry was 1982, uh,
Wow.
before everybody had desktops or even those suitcases on their desk, which were called laptops at the time.
Right, right, yeah.
Um,
I remember
so,
having a bag phone, by the way, if you remember that. Like,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I began this career with a desk, a phone, knowing there was a fax machine up front in the office, and we used to get paper flyers in the mail from brokers and landlord agents about listings, and I had a mentor, one of the principals of the shop down the hall, whose door was always open, which was very, very nice.
Mhm.
And I just began with the idea of, yes, I need to make a living, but I also need to first do my job, which is serve and do the best thing I can. And hopefully the other side would reciprocate in being loyal.
Now
And that's kind of how I
that's it.
built it. Yeah.
Yeah, rather than lock people in, right? I mean, and one of the reasons I should probably clarify my experience with commercial real estate's not been tremendous, but there was a
Hmm.
point in one of the businesses that I was a part of that we were trying to find new office space because we were trying to build a new culture and a new place, whatever else,
Right.
and it just seemed like the only thought on the minds of the at least the places we were dealing with was locking us into as long a lease as we possibly could,
Mm. Right.
without any regard for whether or not the space was right for us or not right for us, or whether we would succeed there or not succeed there.
Hmm.
It was really just about lock us in And then the other thing was like lots of games with the square footage, right? Like we thought we were getting one square footage, and then, oh, there was all kinds of subtractions and deductions and things like that. It
Right.
just didn't feel like it was a partnership. It felt like it was very one way, you know?
Yeah. No, it's unfortunate when somebody that is supposed to be a service provider becomes just simply an exclusive salesman.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's one thing to, if you have to, we all have pitched our services or products and have to win, right?
Yes, of course.
Once we win, we need to move to the other side of the table completely and say, we're your partner. This is our table. And how do we approach this assignment, this project, this little thing, whatever? It's not little. If it's important to you, it's not little. And so there's the idea of, most of my clients were exclusive in terms of their relationship with me, because as you know, unless you memorialize something in writing or an email, there's always like some wiggle room for the other party to say, well, if I get a call on my cell phone from a broker who I don't know, maybe I should listen to what he or she has to say. But if I do have that exclusive with Marc, who's doing a great job and really present for me and performing according to the mission, then hey, listen, thanks for calling, but I have an exclusive with Marc Miller. We're really good right now, being taken care of.
Right.
So once that relationship is set, it comes down to market knowledge, providing education, and being really, really accessible for companies that do not have a full-time real estate person in their company.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think this idea of a partnership is really important. Now, I have to imagine, though, I mean, commercial real estate's huge, right?
Yeah.
There's some really big players in there.
Oh, yeah.
And there's some pretty standard ways of doing business, which may not always be considered conscious, I would say, right? Or
Right.
in this realm.
Absolutely.
But I know that you've bucked that trend a little bit, right? In some of your own business ventures and so forth. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean, how were you able to bring some of these conscious practices into this world of commercial real estate?
A lot of it was, well, I would say the first part was being really careful with whatever firms I was in, to be careful who I teamed up with. Mm-hmm. And if I teamed up with the wrong people, I would extricate as fast as possible. Because if you're in a team environment and you win business, you got to service it together. And if you don't like how the other people are operating, so that's one element. Mm-hmm. Another element is, I was in the industry about 18 years when, in the year 2000, funny enough, I actually planned to leave this large national company that I was with and start my own boutique. And, notwithstanding the recession in late 2000, and I started my own company. It was November 2000. I'll never forget it, actually, almost 20 years ago. And, and I ended up selling the business in June of 2008, but we, as a boutique in a market with so many huge monoliths and killers like Manhattan, we did very, very well for almost actually 7.5 years.
That's really incredible. Now, can you give us any examples about, how you were able to act a little bit differently or adopt some things that were non-traditional in that space?
Right, absolutely. Well, the first thing was being totally transparent with whoever we would meet with. And we would be totally specific that, first of all, we're not representing any landlords. So we're tenant reps, which means we're your advocates in the process.
Interesting. Yeah.
In our industry, the landlord or the sublessor would pay our commission. So our work with you, whether it's going to be 30 to 60 days or 2 years, is basically gratis. Because of the way the industry works. The big differentiator was, again, always the open playbook. Yeah. That I don't have a hidden agenda, whether I'm a 5 or 8 person boutique or whether I'm with, a large national firm here. Here's what I do for a living, and I'm really here to serve. And by having that, excuse the pun, but conscious capitalism, that, hey, I know that I'm here to make money, but before I ever profit, you need to. Right. And so that was always my attitude. And by the way, ultimately, when working with clients, there were some times when I had to resign from the table or from the assignment because they weren't being transparent with me about their needs, what was going on inside their company. They were a little paranoid about fully embracing the relationship,
Hmm.
or they unfortunately weren't unethical, and I wasn't going to continue to invest months and months in servicing some a party or a group that I couldn't trust. So I just wanted to answer that completely.
Yeah, I know. That's great. That's great. So with that, like kind of springboarding off of that, how do you then turn that into being able to navigate a client through some of these things like loss factors or long-term leases or other areas where
Absolutely.
clearly it's not always in their best interest, right? But
Yeah.
you may not be able to do anything about it. Is there anything that you could have done to kind of bridge that gap a little bit?
Yeah. I mean, what the first thing I did to bridge the gap between the starting point of an assignment and a good result was asking questions.
Hmm.
I really needed to find out where the tenant was, in their current lease with their current liability, if you will, of lease term and rent, and what their goals were.
Yeah.
Were they staffing up for some reason? How did they view the future? If they were only in business for 6 years, when I was introduced to them, or they might have been a multi-generational law firm in business for 40 years, those conversations are a little bit different how they view the commitment that they will make next time.
Hmm.
So I had to kind of digest all of this coming in about growth, the view of future and the history, and then kind of see what's in the market, and then tell them the ups and downs of going long, going shorter, in terms of, and of course, what kind of market were we in then?
Right. Right.
Because in certain of the cycles, I've been through many cycles in New York of rents that were quite low because the supply was so great.
Hmm.
And then other times when brokers like myself and others were really scrambling for what's called hidden or shadow space.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, there was a time in the late 80s where there was so much demand into the 90s, that we almost had to find space before other tenants moved out so that we could take care of the clients that we were representing who were looking.
Interesting. So
It's
you're
interesting.
really anticipating what could come on the market.
Right.
That's pretty interesting. So I imagine too that there's only so much you could do if you come up against a company that says, "Hey, the leases are 5 years," or "This is how we measure things." So this idea of transparency sounds like it's important, but it also sounds like there's an element of matchmaking in there, right? Like trying to find the right space based on what my needs are. So if my needs are only for a 1 or 2 year lease,
Mm-hmm.
or I have specific space requirements, your transparency rather than just trying to put me in a place, trying to put me in the right place, sounds like that would be part of what you did.
You described it beautifully. The only thing I would add is that it's amazing how when you have alternatives to put in front of the client, that the broker can negotiate the terms and surprise people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, when you're telling one landlord that you have a 3.5 year solution and they're trying to put my client in a 5 year, I could use that as leverage, or use the fact that one space out of the alternatives is more efficient
Yeah.
in terms of the layout of the space, the footprint. So whatever there was to use as leverage, or your building's on the side street, but theirs is on the avenue, whatever it might be,
Whatever it is.
as long as I wasn't as long as I wasn't hurting anyone by creating a certain table that I knew would benefit my client, we would do that.
And I think it's so important too, because I could tell you again, in my limited experience with it, like this loss factor thing that you talk about, we found out about it halfway through the process, right? It was almost like we had to find out by accident when we started bringing out the tape
Oh yeah.
measure, and that felt like felt not as good, right, as it
Sure.
could.
Right.
And so I think some of the things you're bringing are really, really interesting. Well, now we kind of come into the future of real estate in New York City, and this is a really interesting topic right now because
Yeah.
everyone has learned to work differently. We're all working from home. Companies have now embraced this technology. I mean, I live in a commuter town. You live in a commuter town.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure your train stations are just as empty as mine are right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
We couldn't get enough parking spaces a year
That's
ago,
right.
and
That's
now
right.
I literally saw boats that are parked in the parking spaces because there's plenty of room, right?
Wow. Amazing.
So it's really kind of interesting how this is going. What do you think this translates into for the future of the commercial real estate business in New York City, and how does that industry have to respond or act differently?
Well, I think, well, first of all, building values commercially have plummeted.
Hmm.
We were at a high of of $750 to $1,100 per foot for a sale of an office building, depending upon whether it was A, B, or trophy. And now we're seeing smart investors looking for 450 to a max of 600, depending upon the length of leases and guarantee of rent that they would have. So that kind of a diminution in the value of an asset means that the expectation of rent and the uncertainty of who they're going to be getting in is huge.
Right.
My feeling is that this is going to be probably at least a 3 to 5 year gut-wrenching thing for the market to really digest how are buildings going to operate cleanly, safely, efficiently, if in fact tenants are not renewing leases and leaving.
Right.
During this continued time of uncertainty, because no tenant in their right mind will be signing a long-term lease. Well, I should say very few. There are a few industries that are extremely confident that long-term they'll still, like for instance, IT.
Yeah.
Exceptional industry to know that you'll, whether it's the cloud-related issue or anything to do with technology, companies and the economy and commerce will always need you.
Yeah.
But when you go away from that, the idea of modeling how a law firm or a tech firm or any kind of other platform or business will operate is extremely uncertain, which means that you're right. The commuters, the home-based, the fact that, maybe people aren't so impressed eating on a very dirty 39th Street outside in the winter.
Yeah. And my personal feeling too is it's even goes beyond safety and cleanliness, which of course are top of mind today. But I think once all this passes, and, history would tell us that it will, we'll start to go back to some level of normalcy. But I wonder if companies will actually ever go back to saying, hey, you have to commute 2 hours in, right? And take literally 2 to 4 hours of your day sitting on a train, sitting in traffic, all these other things to come into work, where we probably could do all that stuff remotely. It feels like that companies are going to have to start thinking about adding different types of value. We talked to one of our guests early on in the show was in the business of helping landlords develop spaces that were comfortable spaces to help train employees or give them places to rest or relax, or, kind of recreate the Google-esque type atmospheres that we all hear about and read about. And I think like something around those lines is where I think we're going to end up going, right? Like companies are going to have to do something more than just say, here's my space, come grab it, right? I mean, it feels like that to me anyway.
Well, it was, as you know, it was already happening for a long time, not only with like a Google, but even buildings were trying to transform themselves into a Google campus for smaller companies that were with venture that were being financed by venture capital and were expanding rapidly, whether it was depending upon the stage of financing they were in.
Yeah.
So we saw companies, as you know, probably have seen as well, visiting people in the city with the bike rooms.
Yeah.
The rooftop terraces or at least balconies or terraces off of certain floors that were usable now.
Right.
There was a time, by the way, when landlords would specifically say you cannot use that balcony.
Right. Incredible, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like more. So I think it kind of naturally moves the market away from this kind of one-sided, deal. It's basic supply and demand. I get it, right? But it feels like there could be more driving it, right? There could be actual genuine concern for the well-being of employees, for the well-being of companies, right? And that's part of this whole conscious game.
Yeah. I mean, I will say even before COVID, we started seeing, because prices were so high per foot and loss factors were very high, what we spoke about before, landlords were converting floors that they could not rent into common areas and beautifully furnished common spaces for the huddling, for the conferences, for napping, for nap rooms, and God knows what else. So, but now that COVID has come in, landlords are going to be more under pressure to, maybe even convert part of their buildings to residential if the city would allow that zoning. So it's going to be a lot of change, and it's not going away quickly.
Going to be a lot of change. It's a very good way to say it. So, so I have to ask you also now, I know that because commercial real estate is maybe this is part of the reason, but you're transitioning a little bit into the world of art, which is very interesting for a person with your background, right? Tell us a little bit about that before we wrap up.
Well, absolutely. I appreciate your asking. Well, since I was a kid growing up in Queens, I used to love drawing with whatever material I had, whether it was, colored pencils or pastels. And my dad was a photographer, and he once brought me to a paper factory where the owner gave me different sheets of white paper. And that clicked for me when I got home, just to start creating color and patterns and geometry on the paper.
Mhm.
And so what it's done, Bob, over the years is actually about, I mean, it wasn't because of the pandemic necessarily, but about 2 years ago, I simply started getting more serious about completing work, art pieces that I had begun, and then really getting more motivated to do more.
Mhm.
So initially it was with, believe it or not, like the back of business cards,
Oh.
creating like works of art there. And then I started going back to my regular size, which was like 9 by 12.
Hmm.
So my work is a small scale, and my goal has been, and now especially with office leasing being much slower and less, and clients not calling as often, is to see if there would be a demand, for my small scale art, whether it's the micro hotel market, micro residential, or could be, I've been looking into trying to contact some of the pharma companies about branding,
Yeah.
or because some of the art looks like it's microbiology in a way.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Now, so sounds like your market that you're trying to target for that is still like commercial businesses or companies. Is that where you envision that this would be, front and center?
Not 100%. I'm very agnostic right now about the home market or the consumer market. And so what I'd like to do is I'm going to be determining how what kind of size can some of my work be expanded to, from a copy point of view, and
Yeah.
how to price the originals, and then perhaps what some of the other quality artists do is they see about the note card market and the other market, where you could emblazon your work on like a piece of metal. Have you ever seen
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I have. Yeah.
So I think from a home decorating point of view, I think there's a lot of potential there I'm going to be looking into. And in this conversation, if after you ever have any thoughts or clients that might be in some of these spheres, I'd love to have that conversation.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely, for sure.
Thank you.
I'm happy to make connections in any way that I can. I love, obviously, I'm a creative person too. I have that right and left side of the brain going as well. So
Right.
art is always front and center in my
Yeah.
in my case. It's music and
Oh,
creativity and things
nice.
of that nature.
What do you,
But
do you play? Do you play something?
I do. I play piano, keyboards,
Oh, wow.
synthesizers. Yeah, and
Beautiful.
I
Awesome.
compose music, and so I try to bring those worlds together as well. And I just think it's kind of part of the whole conscious atmosphere. And I've always tried to do this in business as well, is to kind of bring part of yourself into the business, right? And allow that for the employees as well, so those barriers aren't up. And that's why I love this subject a little bit. Like the commercial
Nice.
real estate guy who does art, that's just kind of cool, right?
Thank
That
you.
is just really cool.
I
So
appreciate it. I appreciate that.
yeah, so really great. Well, Marc, I want to make sure that we don't leave without giving you a chance to tell people where they can find out more about you and what you're up to.
Well, thank you. I would say the best email for me right now is Marc, M-A-R-C, at realbroker, R-E-A-L, brokercommercial.com, all spelled out.
Mm-hmm.
My personal art website, where I do have about 40 works that people could look through, and they can get in touch with me directly through the site as well, is www.marcsmiller, marcsmiller.com. And
Awesome.
those are the best ways.
That's fantastic. That's really great. Well, I knew we'd have a really interesting conversation. There's so much to unwind and unpack in this commercial real estate area, but it's really nice to see that, it can be a partnership and there can be really mutual benefit. And just finding the right people and the right players, I think, is really important when companies are going into this space. So So
Right.
just great stuff, great stuff. So again, to the listeners and viewers, thank you for joining. Hopefully you've learned something here. And if you have, please subscribe. Please give us a thumbs up. Please tell your friends. We're trying to spread the word as much as we can and provide as much of an educational resource as we can for companies in the New York City area and beyond, how they can adopt some of these conscious business practices. So until then, we will, I didn't say one other thing, that we do have to also thank the sponsors of our chapter, the Tomiak Foundation and the Core Club. Their support makes programs like this possible. So thank you very much. And Marc, thank you again. It was really, really a
Well,
pleasure.
I enjoyed it so much. Have a great day. Be well. See you soon.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, everyone. We'll see you back here in another episode of Conscious Business Connections.